Now, in other significant news, Qatar's emir has slammed Israel for last week's attack on the Gulf state, calling it cowardly and treacherous. It comes as leaders of Arab and Islamic states have convened in Doha for an emergency summit to discuss a unified response. Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani said Hamas leaders had been studying a U.S. ceasefire proposal presented to them by Qatar and Egypt when it took place. Hamas said the attack killed 5 of its members, but not its leadership. A member of Qatar's internal security forces was also killed in the attack. Egypt's president has warned that Israel's current actions hinder any chances of new peace treaties in the Middle East. The summit, which is being held in support of Qatar, is expected to adopt a resolution. According to a draft seen by Reuters news agency, the resolution will warn that the attack and other hostile acts by Israel threaten coexistence and efforts to normalize ties in the region. Well, let's bring in our reporter Adel Al-Maroi, joining us live from Doha. Adel, welcome to the program. Thank you once again for joining us here on Africa Live. Adel, leaders have been speaking there for the better part of the summit, and there's already a draft declaration. What are the highlights from this?
Well, the meeting has concluded and the draft has been endorsed, making it an official resolution to the Arab Islamic Summit in Doha, Qatar. And basically the Arab and Islamic leaders have all strictly condemned the attacks on the state of Qatar, and they have warned against Israel actions, if not intervened by the international community, that could lead to further instability, as the number of countries that suffer from Israeli attacks have been only growing during the past 2 years. Arab and Islamic leaders have called the international community to take on their responsibilities to try and protect international law, which Israel violates. And if it keeps doing so, the world order in general might be jeopardized, as less countries would abide to it if Israel keeps violating it. That's according to some of the speeches and the resolution that has been ongoing. Meanwhile, Arab leaders have also held tight to their calls for a two-state solution. Despite showing compromise in how that two-state solution should be, they held tight actually to the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as a capital, which appears to be kind of a response to the Israeli attacks, that Arabs will not accept anything less than that.
Okay.
And finally, in parallel of these ongoing talks, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, the oil-rich nations, 6 members, have announced activating their joint defense mechanism, and the first meeting of which will take place here in Doha later on among defense officials of the 6 countries as a deterrent for further attacks if they happen again.
All right. Adel, what are the realistic expectations on how this summit will impact the situation in the Middle East? How do you see it?
Without international support, there will be not much to change, and that may lead to frustration among the Arab impact, and therefore the reaction may differ on the longer term. But they are here to show solidarity. They are here to show that they're frustrated by Israel's actions. We're talking about leaders of 57 countries who have cleared their schedule within just a few days to come to Doha, a city that has just been a target of Israeli attacks, to show solidarity and show that they reject such attacks. It's a strong stance. Some leaders rarely appear in such gatherings. We've seen them for the first time in years, if not decades, participating in these meetings, and therefore it is quite clear that the Islamic and Arab world want to see a change. They want to see peace and security, and they see Israel as a threat to achieving peace and security, not a caller for peace, as it claims. This is basically one of the statements that have been announced here today at the summit. So in general, without further ado and without influence from the international community to reach peace, solve the Palestinian crisis, put an end to Israeli attacks on the region, really nothing much can change except this strong display of rejection to the attacks and support to fellow Muslim and Arab countries.
Adel Al-Maroi in Doha, thanks for that. The location of Hamas's political bureau is once again in question. Israel has issued repeated warnings that it can attack Hamas leaders in Doha again if Qatar does not expel them. After almost 13 years in Doha, the Palestinian group may look for a new base for its political office after moving between Jordan, Damascus, and Doha since 1991. CGTN's Adel Marui reports.
Ahead of Tuesday's Israeli strikes targeting Hamas leadership in Doha, the presence of Palestinian armed resistance groups in the Qatari capital had already been under reconsideration. Back in November last year, the US administration suggested relocating them, despite having originally requested their move to Doha in 2012. Turkey and Oman were considered possible alternatives. Oman was seen suitable due to its strong ties with the US and experience in mediation roles, such as brokering the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement. Turkey, a staunch supporter of the Palestinian cause, maintains tense relations with Israel, and crucially, it would have been far less likely for Israel to carry out bold attacks on Hamas members there as it did in Qatar.
Practically, they have only one option, which is to go to Turkey. The other option, which is possible but very risky, is to relocate to Iran. But in Iran, there is no minimum political or diplomatic capital that can give them any protection.
Having
Hamas in Turkey will be a burden on them. Turkey has its commitments to NATO, and its strong ties with the US could come in the way. Egypt is a likely alternative, at least until the negotiations reach an agreement for the hostages in Gaza and for the end of the genocide and a ceasefire agreement. There will be alternatives for Hamas to find a place, though their options might be limited.
So far, Qatar has temporarily suspended its mediation role in the Gaza ceasefire talks. Yet following the Israeli attacks on its capital, it has now vowed to continue that role. Doha may have already signaled that Hamas leaders will stay. That was evident when the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, participated in the funeral prayer for those killed in the attacks.
If Qatar received a renewed protective commitment from the US administration, I think Hamas's leadership will remain here, because there is a need to negotiate with Hamas, whether they are in Doha or anywhere else. But as the strike failed, and considering the international condemnation of it and the Security Council resolution, Hamas will likely remain in Qatar until the Israelis get their hostages. Only then will the existence of Hamas be revisited.
In the Israeli mind, there are two categories of Hamas leadership. Those who were involved in the decision-making of October 7, and I think it will be difficult in the future for those to stay in Doha. And even if the Qataris are willing to host them, I think they won't feel safe in Doha anymore. Others who are known not to be a part of the decision-making related to October 7, it's possible to stay if the Qataris have enough trust in the Americans, again, about this issue, which is not likely, but it's possible.
Keeping Hamas in Doha carries significant risks. Israel has shown it can target and kill Hamas leaders in the heart of 4 Middle Eastern capitals: Beirut, Damascus, Tehran, and now Doha. It also warned Qatar that similar attacks could be repeated if Hamas leadership remained in the country.
I think the Israelis trying to establish a precedent, and the message is for the Qataris more than to Hamas. They could have targeted Hamas in any other places, but I think they want to send a message to Qatar because of Qatar's support to Gaza.
While Israel failed to kill Hamas leaders in Qatar, it demonstrated that it can attack yet another Arab country without facing major repercussions. That may make many countries think twice before hosting Hamas, whether the group decides to leave or Qatar asks it to do so. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Doha, Qatar.